Thank you, Arne. My name is Johan. I'm going to facilitate today's session. On the panel today, we've got Christo Pienaar. He's the estate manager at Schonenberg. It's down there in Somerset West. And he will explain to us more about his estate. And Andrew Barton, he's at St. Francis Links, down there at close to Humansdorp, if I'm correct, Andrew.
That's correct.
Before we start, I would like to welcome you all to the first community conversation webinar for CAISA for 2023. Our next one will be on Wednesday, the 15th of March, and that specific session will all be about CAISA. We will give you some feedback on the courses that we in the process to confirm via the Tshwane School for Business and Society, also what we call the Siafunda courses. We're working on quite exciting stuff there. The membership joining and also the renewal. For those of you on the database, you will receive regular emails from us, and Arne will drop the links in the chat box for those of you who want to renew and for those of you who are not members to join. At that meeting, we will also give you feedback on the CMCA certification, the exams that we've lined up for you that you can take, same as the AGM date that's up and coming. Two other things that I also want to bring to your attention is to, if you would like to get involved, drop us a note at info@caisa.co.za, and that's at any level. If you feel you've got to contribute on the panel, give us your name, you'll go through a process, and it's not exclusive, it's not just for a select few. The more we can get to participate, the better. Also a panel of experts. For those of you who like to write articles, reach out to me. We're happy to look through it and post it on our Facebook page if it's all about the industry. For those of you who do receive our emails from our database, check your spam. Sometimes I think it goes into spam or junk mail. Make sure that you receive it. I send it from the info@caisa.co.za email address. And if you're not on the database, for those of you who are non-members, again, drop me a note and I'll add you to the database that we communicate all the events coming up. Remember to follow us on our social media platforms. There's a Facebook page, there's a YouTube, there's LinkedIn. Follow us there for the latest information and the happenings in the chapter. And this year we celebrate our 10 years of the chapter, the first and one of 3 international chapters of CAI. There's a logo. Arne will also put it in the chat. Please download it, use it on your email signature, and get people to join the chapter. And thank you for everybody who's here today. So right, let's start with our community conversation today. I'm going to give Christo the opportunity first just to introduce himself, tell us something about his estate. How long has he been in the game? Over to you, Christo.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you for hosting us today. Yeah, I am Christo Pienaar from Schonenberg Estate here in Somerset West. Been with the estate for almost 8 years. 4 of those as estate manager, and started out as the facilities manager on the estate. And yeah, we association, we've got about 720 members in the estate, and I think about 2,500 people residing on the estate. So I would say medium-sized association, and yeah, happy to be employed in Western Cape.
The next one is Andrew Barton. Andrew, St. Francis Links, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Johan, and welcome everybody. I am from St. Francis Links. We're in the Eastern Cape. It's a beautiful piece of the world. If you've never been here, you better come and join us. We're in a state of about 540 residential units with some commercial units on as well. We are relatively young. when I say that, it's about 16 years. We opened in 2006. And yeah, development is growing very fast. I think COVID has done us a huge favor. So there's definitely some immigration happening. We've got about 253 completed homes and probably about 50 to 60 under construction. And then we are run by an exco and as well as a board of directors. And yes, we are loving life here in St. Francis.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I'm going to kick off my first question to the two of you at a high level when it comes to the budget. What's your budget process that you follow? And I'm going to give Christo the opportunity to go first on this one. Very high level, Christo goes through your process at Schonenberg.
Okay, Johan, I think what's important to us here is to empower all role players, and that starts with the maintenance team, who's got a lot of input into operations. So we give them some ownership to draft their own budget for their department, which we then escalate to let's say a group of nominated finance committee and trustees who go through that first process to determine the guidelines that we will build our budget on. We will have an initial meeting, go through the guidelines, make sure that everybody is on the same page, and we will decide that the headline stuff like CPI and interest growth, look at service level agreements, increases, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, etc., etc. We normally start that process around September, which is also the opportunity for us to review management plan as well as our asset management plan. It's two separate programs that we use, which is quite a big input into our budget, and that puts us in a place where we can make some fairly accurate assumptions for the year ahead. Once again, those two programs have headline inputs that we can play around with and make sure that they're aligned with the economic situation in the country. From September, we will draft get a first draft budget that we verbally will communicate with the FinCom and just go through the main movers within the budget. From there on, we will draft a summary financial report and give initial feedback to the trustee committee after the recommendation from the finance committee. And then we will start with the real fine-tuning of this whole process. I am not a accountant, by profession, so I make use of building relationship with knowledgeable people. I've also got a financial partner that I work closely throughout the whole year that can act as a soundboard, but also let's call it a mini audit on our month-to-month reporting that I do to trustees, just to give that extra little bit of security. And it's also a little bit of a check-in and an oversight. As soon as we went through the detail in the budget, I'll identify one or two key role players during this process. We will financial report to the trustees, where we will then make sure, that that all the items are included, everything is relevant and up to date. Final approval for us is normally beginning of December for us to declare interim levy in December, according to what our constitution instructs us, which will be effective from the 1st of March of the year, and then formally approved general meeting, which we normally have in May. And that, I think, is at a high level the process we follow.
Thank you, Christo. Andrew, you're the bean counter there. How does your process work?
Well, I think Christo actually answered all my questions for me.
Okay.
He's much more versed in financial management than what people realize. So, Christy, thanks for taking all my answers. So I don't really have much to say, except that I think one of the key principles is that we try and empower all our managers to be in charge of their budget. Because if you empower people to be part of the starting of the budget, you get their buy-in. And once you've got their buy-in, you can actually manage them better when doing that. So we actually start in our financial year end is September, and we actually start in June already. We start planning for our new financial year and doing the budgets. After that, the managers complete their own sections because we break it down into very small units, even from the workshop right through to food and beverage, to the club operation, to the golf operation, to the course operation. So it's multifaceted. And all those line managers then give their input. We sit around a table with the whole of our executive committee, which consists out of 4 people. That includes Jeff, our CEO. And then we start brainstorming exactly where we are from an operational level and what we want. Then incorporate our CapEx budget and our longer term reserves, going through that process with a key notice on cash flow, especially, in these days, cash is still king, and I think for most estates. So after that process, we formulate and we agree upon it, and the CEO signs off on it, and then we present to the board. So that board meeting is normally in August for implementation and approval on the 1st of October. And what's interesting is we actually have a bit of a feedback to the members, just on a high level, just to say, where are we and where we're going. And after the August board meeting is actually where we start distributing the budget, just on a high level, to say, these are the proposed increases, this is what we're aiming for, and this is what you're going to end up paying, because that's the bottom line. People are very conscious of what they pay. And we actually then also just explain shortly in a summary form, just, what we're trying to achieve with that. And that's in short our budget process.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, I just got 1 or 2 follow-up questions from you. I didn't hear the word FinCom or the financial committee. I have the ExCo and then to the board. Do you have a FinCom that plays a role?
Currently, we don't. So we've got an audit, risk and compliance committee.
Very interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So we do it a bit differently from most estates. I know a lot of estates have a financial committee. But I think we're more oriented to run it like a business, a pure business, and then make sound business decisions based on that.
I'm going to get back later on who approves what. As a matter of interest, I've been involved with the estate where they've got a financial committee and an audit and risk. Separate committees, not allowed to be the same members, and the MOI clearly that the head of the audit and risk must be a CA, qualified chartered accountant. Okay, so now you've gave us a brief overview, high level of the process and so forth. Your period that you approve, for me, the approval of the budget, but also that you forecast. Give us an idea. Do you go 12 months, 16 months? What's the process at St. Francis?
So, Johan, we forecast on, so our approved for the year going forward, but we also have a 20-year reserve plan. And it's very interesting to note when you start looking at the review of your reserve plan, how your operating expenses are actually filtered through that. So we do a very high level forecast, I would say, for longer than a year, because by rights, things can change drastically, even within 5 years. 5 years is probably the maximum term that you could go operationally for your budgets. Well, we do look at the longer term 20-year because of longer term assets and that. But forecasting is basically on a year-to-year basis.
Thank you. And Christo there at Schonenberg?
I think similar. Our reserve fund management plan is a 3-year plan, which I'd just like to note to say that people will ask why not 10 years and why 3 years. But I think the thinking behind that is that there may be big replacements with longer life expectancy, which may lie in years 15 or whatever the case might be. So if you have a 3-year plan, for instance, and the replacement value would lie in year 15, you technically only in 5 years' time will realize that, my gosh, there's quite a big capital layout lying ahead where you could have had 5 more years to build that reserve. It's always the case of you can't you can't let the current members suffer and let life pave the street of gold for the future generation, but you can't also make them pay for for our sins. So I think that's why we adopted a 30-year plan. So we also do the same. We also have a 12-month lookout for operation. We do 3 years generally. So we, as part of our feedback to members, we give them a 3-year lookout of the items that's aligned or lined up for the next 3 years. And because we have our routine maintenance plotted in cycles. So, for instance, we've got a big perimeter, which the painting is quite a big capital or quite a big expenditure, operational expenditure. We know that we try to cover the whole perimeter in, let's say, about 5 years. So we would know what these big ticket items each, which we can predict that will happen for the next 5 years. So we keep our eye on that, but we basically report for about 3 years ahead. We've got a monthly forecasting meeting. Firstly, once again, with the persons that's responsible for their portion of the budget, which we take up to a level with me and the bookkeeper, and then that's reported to the financial committee. And we report, or every month we look towards the end of the financial year and trying to get that right. But as you know, even if you try to look a month, anything can happen. But that's the guideline we use.
If I can just add to you, Johan, sorry, if I can just add to what Christo is saying, I think it's so important, and Christo, you're right. When you go to longer term, it's to make sure that every estate is different, but to make sure that you've got all your assets included in that plan. So what we do is up to 20 years, but we've got a column for 20 years plus, just to say that your buildings and everything like that's included there as well. Because you'd never want to get into a situation where you forget about something and not for that eventuality.
And in your case, do you have a financial committee that plays a role?
Yes, we do. We have a financial committee. So we've got terms of references for all of our committees, of which the finance committee also has its terms of reference. And we do our best to employ. We make sure that there's a accountant, on the team. We've always been in a position where there was, professional people on the committees, and I think the contingency plan is because it's always difficult to identify people to participate in these committees. It's quite a challenge. But there is a contingency for that. Is then we'll just pull in a partner that can come and sit in these committees as a oversight. But we have a financial committee, no decision-making authority. We've got a matrix that we build for decision-making, but a lot of or some of that decision-making up to a certain level is with me, and then the rest is with the trustee committee. I just need to add is we have a body corporate component incorporated into ours with a manager that manages their budget. I sit in on a monthly meeting and can have some input. We manage their reserve fund, not reserve fund. We manage their asset management plan, 10-year plan, because we have the program already in place. And I think we've got some experience in it. We manage that for them. And that is part of a memorandum of agreement that we've got with the body corporate.
And in your case, do you go out and in the industry in terms of the levy or security or landscaping, those kind of things?
Yes, definitely. I think our point of departure, I just want to say, is so operations got its requirements. I think, as Andrew said, you need to make sure that the operational items are 100% correct, that you build in there things that you think you can't complete the next year. I think that's a big issue, where you plan things and you're not able to execute. So we make sure we are lean in that regard. We also have a reserve fund fed from the reserve fund management plan. We've got, the requirement that plan dictates to us, and I think there's a lot of decision making against that target, how well we want to achieve against that, making firm decisions or kicking the can down the road scenario. But we do checks. I just wanted to say, so we are guided by that in principle. I mean, if we get to what our operational requirement is and what effect has on levy, that's, that's what we will take to members. But we do look at what other estates charge, but it's a little bit difficult to interpret if you don't have all the information, like, do they have a clubhouse? Is the clubhouse run as a nice to have or as a business component? So we like to use the phrase fit for purpose, and I think we make sure that our levies are fit for purpose.
Okay. Andrew, I'm going to ask the same question to you, in the sense that you sit with a golf course and a leverage. In terms of benchmarking and industry, what's your take on it, and how do you guys approach it?
I think, it's such a huge topic, because you can look at different provinces as well. So if you look at South Africa as a whole, we know Gauteng, we know Northwest Province, we know the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Natal, all the places, even the Free State. There's different appetite for different members. And I think that's really what is of most concern, is that when you start benchmarking, is that you identify what you want to achieve, because it's like Christo mentioned as well. I mean, not everybody's the same. And you have to highlight items that actually resonate with you and your member base. And that's really what it's about, because there's, even if you start looking at investments, for certain member bases, some are conservative and others are more risk averse. So it's knowing your membership base and then benchmarking accordingly to that. Do you want to be 5-star or do you want to be 3-star? Ultimately, it's what your membership base really want. So benchmarking, yes, I'm all for it. I think it's a great initiative, even to do per province, because there are really price differences from the Eastern, and the cheapest. But but so it's really important, and you can't ever discount that.
Okay. So Andrew, you've told us the process that you've been through and how you do it, and the roles of the committees and your role and those kind of things. So in your case, who finally approves the budget at St. Francis Links?
That would ultimately be the board of directors. Currently, we're still in the development. So we're probably nearing the end of our development period, but we've got 4 developer appointed directors and 4 homeowner appointed directors. And we've been very fortunate, because I do think that your board is critical in making a decision if they are the ones to approve the budget. And we've got leaders of industry on our board, so we're very fortunate, which makes my life sometimes a bit more difficult. But it is to the benefit of all members. It's to the benefit of all members, which is great. So they ultimately make the decision noted for approval. Not approval, more just for acceptance.
Certification for acceptance. There's the word.
Correct.
So if you go to the board approves it, the board says the levy used to be 5 Rand, now it's going to be 10 Rand. I'm just picking figures here.
Yes.
Your communication with the members, is it at an AGM, an SGM, a special meeting, a town hall meeting? Just give us some insight on that final thing. Now I'm a member. you know, I want to say, now the board tells me my levy is going to double or CPI increase. That final process, explain to us or tell us how it works.
Well, I think Christo and I had a bit of a pre-discussion about this as well. So it's quite interesting that, and I've alluded to it before as well, is we've got a communication after every board meeting that goes out to members. Just high-level items, what has happened, what is going on, and that's a quarterly report. So part of that would be then in August, we would then distribute our state of the estate, not state of the nation, but so it's a very clever wordplay from Jeff.
Yeah.
Most of you know Jeff Claus, he's brilliant with that. And we actually give some feedback in that state of the estate to say what the increases are and what we try, which also includes, you know, what capital requirements we will have, as well as a cash flow forecast. Ultimately, you know, cash flow, you know, it is vitally important. That's what we're mostly passionate about.
Thank you. Thank you. And Christo, in your case, who finally approves the budget or that final approval process? How does it work?
Yeah, so after the trustees approve that, their responsibility in terms of our constitution is to lay before the annual general meeting the estimate on the anticipated income and expenditure for approval to the members. So in technical terms, the association or the members of the association need to approve the budget. Actually, they need to approve the income and expenditure. What obviously feeds into that is, like we spoke about earlier, is what we also share is also cash flow. We also look at that. We submit the financial statements, and we also submit a CAPEX plan, a 3-year outlook CAPEX plan. What we do is, after we declare the interim levy, we would invite, let's call it concerned members for a sort of a one-on-one if that is required, but we also invite them to a meeting, which we draft a compacted summary financial report, which we present to those members, and then open the platform for some questions. I think what we try to do is to avoid, which will obviously happen, is to scrutinize, line by line items. We try and focus on that is a pre-meeting, sort of before the AGM, and then when we also invite them to sort out all the questions before we get to the AGM, because I think we're quite frank that the AGM is not the ideal platform for discussion. I mean, with no disrespect, that there are different levels of understanding about all things, especially financials. And if you have a one-on-one or smaller group, it's just much easier and practical to go through the detail and explain why we made certain decisions and why some things increased more than others.
Thank you. For those on the webinar, you're welcome to drop some questions in the chat box. We'll see how we can work through them. As a matter of interest, the approval of the levies or the budget differs from estate to estate. You'll find it in your MOI. There's some estates that go line by line item, vote on it line by line. Some the board approves and merely inform the owners that, by the way, this is the new budget, the levy. But I think as the industry evolves and people are getting better educated, they want some more questions and or more questions answered. Really get far more involved. Okay, now we've got an approved budget. Reporting. How does your reporting? How do you report back in terms of the budget or to the board? And is there a specific format that you use in terms of feedback, in terms of tracking the budget? Christo?
Yeah, so we have, like I said, a financial committee. I report on a monthly basis on progress. First, we have a monthly forecast meeting with the team to look at things fall in place as we planned, a couple of months ago. And then we put that together. I create a report, and on a monthly basis report to the finance committee, and then if there's any amendments, bring that in and then report to the trustees. And once again, focus on the basic income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow analysis. That is done on a monthly basis. Then on a quarterly basis with a newsletter, we will report mainly on the capital expenditure plan for the year. See if, or report on the progress against the bigger projects. And also we accommodate individual requests. So, we find that there are a few people who are a bit more interested than others, and our doors are always open for those, to allow those people to come and visit us and discuss why we made certain decisions, etc. So basically reporting is on a monthly basis, and quarterly feedback to members.
Okay. And Andrew, I know you've touched on it and how you do it. Just to summarize, how do you give feedback, and what format in the reports that you track your budget?
Well, Johan, seeing that we've got a bit of a different operation on our side, it gets a bit more tricky with the golf course and that, and food and beverage. Those reports could be, some of them are daily, just tracking revenue compared to where we are, and food cost, etc., all the way through to the monthly reports. And then on a monthly basis, I would actually go through the consolidated as well for the whole operation, the estate and the club. And quarterly we would meet with the board, and then also just discuss where we are year to date, and then follow through with that or any adjustments. It's important to note as well that we've got a chart of authority in place. Ultimately, it gives us a guideline as management just to operate within that framework. And should we be in excess of budget or additional spend is required, there's actually certain levels that we have to escalate it to the board for approval. So that will also then happen during the quarter. And then most of them will probably be ratified at the quarterly board meetings. And then afterwards, we have the state of the estate, and that's the feedback to the members. And that is also purely a high level. And sometimes it's good news, if you're buying 15 additional carts for number 4 ranked course in the country, people are happy about that. So
yeah, so that ranking was quite important for Andrew to throw in there. And it's I've been fortunate to play the course many years ago, and my playing partner was Jen. So it was what an experience. I just want to touch there on that tracking of the budget. So my question to you, and it's the 2 questions. What if you don't sort of stick to the budget for whatever reason? Is there repercussions? And secondly, part of that is, do you use your budget and the meeting of the budget, in other words, you on track or on target, to incentivize members of the team? Maybe you've got something there that you want to share with us, both sides, the negative and the positive.
I go first.
Shall we go with Christy?
Yeah, Andrew, yours are a little bit tricky, so it's good to hear how you do it. But let's go with Kristen. Kristen?
So we look, just to further to what Andrew said, is we follow the same process. If we can't stick to the budget for, let's call it unapproved expenditure up to a certain level, we also take the FinCom, which will make a recommendation to the trustees after I submitted motivation for the, let's call it additional expenditure. That will, I keep a table from month 1, table to show, how that builds up, so you don't lose sight of the, the consolidated over expenditure over, over the 12 months. That stays in the report from the first month of reporting. And then if we don't stick to the budget, it all depends on if the correct procedure was followed. I'm talking about if there's expenditure without approval. Obviously, there is processes for that. But I think ultimately it reflects in my performance assessment, at the end of the year. I think that's what it boils down to. And unfortunately, we don't have anything in place. If we, I just need to differentiate between savings and surrendering of funds, and not mix the two. But if there's any savings, there's no remuneration, if you achieve above and beyond. I think it will be noted as part of the performance assessment, but there's, if you can generate savings to this or this effect, it will benefit you in this way.
Okay. Andrew, with food and beverage golf course, obviously you're a bit more sales orientated than just,
Yes.
managing SLAs. Share with us how it works at St. Francis Links.
Well, I think once you start looking into food and beverage operations, etc., that's when you start looking at cost control, not just your revenue and seeking revenue, but it's about cost control. So there are certain incentives in place there.
Okay.
So that we can actually monitor that and achieve that, because it's not just about achieving, it depends on your setup. And I think that's what's so important, is that our club members come first. And visitors, you treat visitors as if they're going to become members. So for us, it's about the quality as well. So that's why there's a fine line between achieving your targets and the quality that you produce. So that's just an interesting thing on that line. The other thing I just wanted to mention that Christo alluded to as well is that the budget is a living thing as well. And I know we can get set in our ways, but sometimes we have to adapt. Previously, before this, Christo and I just spoke, COVID, for example. I mean, that's the prime example of a budget. I mean, we all had great intentions and we all were skeptical of what's going to happen, and things did happen. So you adapt your budget, but we stick to our budget no matter what. In the sense of the original budget that was approved is what we stick to. If there are overs or unders, we actually record those. And that has to be in accordance with our Charter of Authority, either approved by the board or by management, depending on the amounts involved. And it's important to keep over and under in different line items in your budget so that you can actually give feedback at the end of the year to your members as well, or quarterly like we do, so that people know exactly where they stand. You also need to make sure that you've got a stabilization fund. I mean, having reserves, you need to have an element of what if. And I think that safety net is really important for homeowners, just to know that they are secure, because nobody wants a special levy. Nobody wants to have a sudden adjustment to their levies or their subscriptions. So to try and work in your reserves to have a bit of a stabilization fund also assists with those peaks and valleys when it comes to certain expenses. I mean, even on the golf course, we might all of a sudden have a disease that we didn't budget for because we took a very conservative approach. And you have to adapt to that. But that will all be explained with your overs and unders, and measuring your budget is therefore crucial.
Andrew, we lost you there for a second. Just repeat that last 2 seconds.
So ultimately, it's just the budget is crucial and the monitoring thereof. That is really critical, so that you can see where you are and where you're going.
What I hear from both of you from the beginning was you used the word reserve fund, stabilization fund, capex, capital reserve funds, those kind of things. Just give me an idea of what's your approach at St. Francis Links in terms of reserves and reserve studies and a capex capital reserve. How do you see it? What's in your pot?
So ultimately, I know we all depreciate our assets, and that's one way of funding it in the future with replacement. But we go further than to our reserve, because we know the cost of our entire fleet, even for the golf course. And we know what items will be replaced in which year. Some of it might be 3 years, some 5 years, 10 years, or 12 years. And it's important to note that your depreciation won't always keep track of that. So we've actually built in a factor to make sure that we've got sufficient funds for when that replacement actually does happen. So it's a quite a bit of a, I wouldn't call it a jump act, but it's making sure that, you know, your reserve, you always think you've got enough, but it's always better. And you need that bit of a safety net. We also work on a contingency of about 10% escalation, just to make sure that there's always a bit 10% plus. To cover foreign exchange, for example, is a huge problem for us with golf course equipment. So we need to make sure that we're covered for that as well.
And do you own all the equipment?
We own all the equipment,
Okay.
and we're probably one of the more fortunate estates. Everything is on cash. So
Yes.
you know, we're quite fortunate with that. But I think that's why our investment policy is so critical as well. And we've got a bit more risk than normal people. It's not just money in the money market. And it's to ensure that we beat inflation and we can actually stay ahead with the price increases and inflation that we're seeing now as well.
Just for members, for those on the webinar, we're almost going to wrap. I've got two questions for Christo and one for Andrew. We try and stick to the 45 to 50 minutes, and if there are questions, drop it in the chat box, and Anay will alert us to it and work through it. Christo, in your case, reserve studies, capital reserves, contingency, all those kind of things. What's your approach to it at Schonenberg?
I think firstly is when I started here, we had I would say fairly accurate asset replacement plan, which was tied into the budget, where the asset replacement plan had a target closing balance for the year for the reserve fund. 10-year plan. I think the main issue of the plan was it was basically a spreadsheet of which a certain person was the owner. Now, I think just from a point of departure, I really tried to make sure that all of our systems and procedures are not reliant on me. That there's some form of continuity and backup, definitely backup, because the life can take a funny turn, and then all of a sudden the association or body corporate realized that all their future plans was built on one person. So we try to steer away from that and get critical people in for support to make sure that there's continuity, and also make sure that we have plans in place or programs in place that can automate to a big extent that have backup. So, like I said, we've got a 30-year plan. We've got every single item on this estate in that plan, and we've got a few plugins, like every year we can review the anticipated CPI. We can review growth on our investment. We have an opportunity to import new capex that was procured. We have a chance to move items to that wasn't executed to next or 2 years. And the assets included there is basically the asset that we import is the current value. We project that forward with CPI, obviously. We look at the first occurrence of replacement date and then roll that forward. But like I said, it's a living plan. It's not something you draft and then you leave it for a couple of years. We review it. But we actually in a position, I think the plan is as such that we can review it, more than once yearly, because it's fairly easy to use. And at this stage, you can actually earn a little bit of money by doing some promotion, because some of the guys who assisted me with that plan is actually on this, in the meeting now. So just raise your hand if you want me to say something. Any one of you, would know who you are. But yeah, we've got I think a very solid plan that's fairly automated, that's got backup, and that is very accurate, that gives us three things. It gives us a opening balance, available reserves. It gives us the capital layout that is planned for the next 3 years. It gives us the expected injection into the reserve fund, and then it gives us the closing balance. And under the line in the budget, we indicate that as a target, and we communicate to the members the percentage of achievement against that target. And then dependent on, there was a decision made that we do not want to fall below 85% of the required target, but if we dip, or we somewhere between 100 and 80, communicate the risks that's involved with not reaching 100% target. So basically, that's how we do it, Johan.
Thank you. I'm going to give Andrew remarks on his side first, and then Christo. And if there are not any questions thereafter, then we're going to wrap the session. For everybody on the webinar, thank you. For the participants, for Christo and for Andrew, thank you very much. I'm looking for my invite to come and visit your estates again. It was a privilege when I did this year, or not this year, last year, and a couple of years ago. Just a reminder of our next one on the 15th of March, where we will talk about CAISA. Remember to renew your membership. It's fairly easy now, and download that logo, and please use it in your email signature to help us to celebrate our 10 years of existence. Andrew, your closing remarks.
Closing remarks, Johan. That's the easy part, and I would say planning. The better the information that you put in, the better the result will get out. And if you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves.
Fantastic. Andrew, thank you. And please send us to your team.
Well, definitely. Thank you. Thanks, Johan, and thanks, everybody.
Christo, your closing remarks for the people on the webinar?
Yes, I will definitely support what Andrew said, and just say that for me, it's also very important to surround you with the right people. You know, we don't know everything. I think when you ask me, one of my favorite sayings is, if you're not going to do anything, but I think we need to continually learn and evolve. And you can ask Andrew, there is, if you give an accountant one question, you know, between 10 of them, you have 10 opinions. No disrespect, Andrew.
It's true.
But no, I like to surround myself with people that's been around the block, that's got new ideas. And I think in this age, we really need to think, to use an old phrase, think outside the box, be creative. And I think we need to be responsible or accountable for our decisions. So you better make sure that we do our best to make the right decisions.
Christo, Andrew, thank you very much. To every participant, thank you for your time. It was a great session. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And see you all on the 15th of March. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I close it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.